The second room was identical to the first, identical in all respects other than one, which was that it had a hatchway let into one wall. A large, vacant-looking girl was leaning through it, with her elbows on the counter and her fists jammed up into her cheekbones. She was watching some flies crawling up the wall, not with any great interest, because they were not doing anything unexpected, but at least they were doing something. Behind her was a table stacked with biscuits, chocolate bars, cola, and a pot of coffee, and we headed straight towards us like a pack of stoats. Just before we reached it, however, we were suddenly headed off by a man in blue crampline, who asked us what we thought we were doing in there. We explained that we were transit passengers on our way to Zaire, and he looked at us as if we had completely taken leave of our senses. "Transit passengers," he said. "It is not allowed for transit passengers to be in here." He waved us magnificently away from the snack counter, made us pick up all our gear again, and herded us back through the door and away into the first room, where, a minute later, the man in the brown crampline found us again. He looked at us. Slow incomprehension engulfed him, followed by sadness, anger, deep frustration, and a sense that the world had been created specifically to cause him vexation. He leant back against the wall, frowned, closed his eyes, and pinched the bridge of his nose. "You are in the wrong room," he said simply. "You are transit passengers. Please go to the other room." There is a wonderful calm that comes over you in such situations, particularly when there is a refreshment kiosk involved. We nodded, picked up our gear in a zen-like manner, and made our way back down the corridor to the second room. Here the man in blue crampline accosted us once more, but we patiently explained to him that he could fuck off. We needed chocolate, we needed coffee, maybe even a reviving packet of biscuits, and what was more, we intended to have them. We outfaced him, dumped our bags on the ground, walked firmly up to the counter, and hit a major unforeseen snag. The girl wouldn't sell us anything. She seemed surprised that we even bothered to raise the subject. With her fists still jammed into her cheekbones, she shook her head slowly at us and continued to watch the flies on the wall. The problem, it gradually transpired after a conversation which flowed like gum from a tree, was this. She would only accept Tanzanian currency. She knew without needing to ask that we didn't have any, for the simple reason that no one ever did. This was an international transit lounge, and the airport had no currency exchange facilities. Therefore, no one who came in here could possibly have any Tanzanian currency, and therefore she couldn't serve them. After a few minutes of futile argument, we had to accept the flawless simplicity of her argument, and just sit out our time there, gloomily eyeing the coffee and chocolate bars, while our pockets bulged with useless dollars, sterling, French francs, and Kenyan shillings. The girl stared vacantly at the flies, obviously resigned to the fact that she never did any business at all. After a while, we became quite interested in watching the flies as well. At last we were told that our flight was ready to depart again, and we returned to our plane load of missionaries. Where, we wondered, had they been while all this had been going on? We didn't ask. After an hour or so, we landed at last at Bukavu, and as we taxied up to the terminal shacks of the airport, the plane resounded to happy cries of, "Oh, how wonderful, the bishop's come to meet us." And here he was, big and beaming in his purple tunic, wearing glasses with frames that were black at the top and transparent at the bottom. The missionaries, the mission school teachers, and the American couple who were merely very interested in missionary work climbed smiling out of the plane, and we, pausing to pull our camera bags out from under our seats, followed them. We were in Zaire. I think the best way of explaining what goes so hideously wrong with Zaire is to reproduce a card we were given by a tourist officer a few days later. One section of it was written in English and is for the benefit of the tourist. It goes like this. Madam, Sir, on behalf of the President-Founder of the MPR, President of the Republic, of his government, and of my fellow citizens, it is agreeable for me to wish you a wonderful sojourn in the Republic of Zaire. In this country you will discover majestic sights, a luxuriant flora, and an exceptional fauna. The kindness and hospitality of the Zairean people will facilitate your knowledge of the tradition and folklore. Our young nation expects much from your suggestions, and thanks you for your contribution in helping it to welcome the friends you will send us in a much better way. Minister of the ECNT. That seems fair enough. It's the other section which makes you begin to worry a bit about what you might in fact find. You are meant to show it to any Zaire you actually meet, and it goes like this. Zairians, help our visitors. The friend holding this card is visiting our country. He is our guest. If he wants to take photographs, be polite and friendly to him. Do your best to have him enjoy his sojourn, and he will come back, bringing his friends with him. By helping him, you help your country. Never forget that tourism provides us with returns which allow us to create new jobs, to build schools, hospitals, factories, etc. On the welcome that our guest would have received will depend our touristic future. It's alarming enough that an exhortation like this should be thought to be necessary, but what is even more worrying is that this section is written only in English. No Zairian, or Zairewa as they actually call themselves, speaks English, or hardly any do. The system by which Zaire works, and which this card was a wonderfully hopeless attempt to correct, is very simple. Every official you encounter will make life as unpleasant for you as he possibly can until you pay him to stop it, in US dollars. He then passes you on to the next official, who will be unpleasant to you all over again. By the end of our trip, this process would assume nightmarish proportions, by comparison with which our first entry into Zaire was a relatively gentle softening up process, and only consisted of 2 hours of rain and misery in huts. The first thing we saw in the customs hut was a picture which gave us a clue about how our expedition to find endangered wildlife in Zaire was going to go. It was a portrait of a leopard. That is, it was a portrait of part of a leopard. The part of the leopard in question had been fashioned into a rather natty leopard-skin pillbox hat, which adorned the head of Marshal Mobutu Sese Seko Kuku Ngbendu Waza Banga, the President of the Republic of Zaire, who gazed down on us with a magisterial calm while his officials got to work on us. One was a large and fairly friendly man who occasionally offered us cigarettes, and the other was a small, nasty man who kept on stealing ours. This is, of course, the classic interrogation method, designed to bring the victim to the brink of pathetic emotional breakdown. It's obviously a technique they learnt somewhere and have just found the habit hard to break, even though all they actually wanted to know from us was our names, passport numbers, and the serial numbers of every single piece of equipment we had with us. The big man in particular seemed to wish us no personal ill, as he guided us gently through the insanity to which it was his duty to subject us, and I came to recognize a feeling I've heard described when oddly close and touching relationships develop between torturers and their victims, or kidnappers and their hostages. There is a feeling of all being in this together. The forms we had to fill in were headed Belgian Congo, crossed out with Zaire written in pencil, which meant they had to be at least 18 years old. The only form they didn't seem to have was the only one we actually wanted. We had been warned by friends that we had to get ourselves a currency declaration form when we entered Zaire, or we would hit trouble later on. We repeatedly asked for one, but they said they had run out. They said we could get one in Goma, and that would be all right. They toyed with the idea of confiscating my Cambridge Z88 laptop computer, just in case we were planning to overthrow the government with it. But in the end, the small nasty man merely confiscated Chris's car magazine on the grounds that he liked cars, and then, for now, we were free.